episode number 164 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, being recorded on Thursday, May 22nd, 2025 at 6:04 p.m. on a chilly day. It's been very warm out lately. It's been beautiful t-shirt weather, beautiful weather to be driving around with the windows rolled down. But today it is cloudy, it is rainy, and I'm sitting here, of course, with a nice hot cup of coffee. I can actually see the steam coming off of it, so I'm going to let that settle for a little bit. I don't know if the microphone is picking up the dehumidifier that's in the background. I recently got one for the film room that I'm currently in, for the sake of anyone who's collecting this kind of stuff knows that you want to store them properly, because over time, the moisture gets into the artwork, the actual inner sleeve. It starts to damage over time and stuff. So, it's also about, you got posters up. You don't want to be, watching them sort of fold in on themselves, as the moisture kind of goes in there. But either way, here we are yet again. I hope everyone's been doing well. I hope you've been keeping up with your goals, with your ambitions, keeping it one day at a time. That's the important thing, man, is to just be on top of it, be consistent no matter what it is, whatever it is you're striving towards, man. And, I'm sitting here, and I don't normally go to the cinema on a Thursday night. I typically do that on Fridays and Saturdays and often Sundays, but I will not be available to go to the cinema tomorrow. So I'm sitting here thinking about the cinema tonight, off to see the new Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, and realizing it will be my 100th film seen theatrically this year. I can't say 100th feature film, because give or take about maybe 15 or so shorts. I'm thinking with the Oscar shorts kind of blended in there. I guess you can maybe count that as one. But either way, that's 100 theatrical films this year. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am always a true proponent of the theatrical experience. No matter, you can't get it at home. The best home theater system in the world. I'm sure it's amazing and I'm sure it's incredible, but being at the cinema and being there with the experience, the whole experience of going to the cinema is something that is just so incredible, and it's so unique to a cinema that you can't ever truly replicate that. No matter if you are able to replicate the smells or replicate the kind of tile that's on the floor, or the seats or the projection or anything like that. The theatrical experience is one that I've always truly advocated for. Even during all the COVID stuff. Once the first theater that reopened around here, I was on that like white on rice, man. I was traveling an hour every weekend to see a couple of films, and I don't really get concessions at the cinema. I'm there to watch the film, man. I'm not gonna be sitting there munching on popcorn and drinking cola and stuff. I'll get a coffee. That's about it. But during these times, the cinemas are struggling, so I'd go there, I'd get the concessions, give them money directly and all that. And it was great seeing all those theaters reopen back up, man. A lot of cinemas got lost there, because all that stuff going on. But, I saw, just a lot of solid films when the theaters were opening back up, contemporary films and older films, seeing Casablanca and The Karate Kid, Citizen Kane, The Wizard of Oz. And then seeing the newer films that were out, that were trying to get people back to the theater. Sorry, that's on my tongue. Unhinged, The New Mutants. Of course, Tenet was a big one. Which, unfortunately, that was one that I really wish would get a re-release, because I wasn't able to see it on a true IMAX, and I would have really have loved to have seen that improperly 143 IMAX. Just wasn't able to. The IMAX is, a lot of the cinemas weren't open, so the fact that, I even got to see it all on a fake IMAX, on a Limax. The sound system was incredible, but I do wish that they would do a re-release of that. And I know they did a small one for like Lincoln Square in New York, but I'm not going all the way to New York for that, man. If I don't got to go to a city, man, I ain't going to a city. I'm not a city guy. I don't want to deal with that nonsense, man. I'm definitely like nice and peace and quiet, man. I don't want nonsense. I got no time for it. I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't get to see it the way it was properly seen. Because especially when I saw Oppenheimer, seeing it in that beautiful 1570 millimeter print was just stunning. I saw it once in digital. It was a night. It was a complete 1:43 frame. It looked incredible. And then I saw it two more times in 1570 or IMAX, I should say, 1570 millimeter, and it was incredible, man. You truly cannot replicate that in any other way. And actually, it's great to see that, or to hear that Nolan's next film, The Odyssey, releasing next year, is going to be the first film in IMAX. First film to ever be shot entirely with IMAX cameras, and I believe that means that it's going to be shooting entirely in 1:43, which is just incredible. I mean, gosh, man, that's going to be truly something to really go out of your way for, man, to really make an event out of. Because I was reading that article, and they were saying that the IMAX cameras they're using now are 30% quieter. Now, what that means exactly, compared to a traditional IMAX, I don't exactly know. I haven't seen any footage or any video of what that sounds like, because IMAX cameras are notoriously loud. I mean, it just sounds like an entire engine running trying to do that. So that's why anytime you see that, you see a film that's in 1:43, it's all ADR, man. You can't even record sound with how loud that is. So I'm curious how, especially if the whole film is going to be in 1:43, they don't have to just ADR the entire movie, the entire film. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's gonna be something that you're gonna want to go out and see theatrically. I mean, you're not gonna want to watch it on your telephone, man. That's ridiculous, you know. Oh, excuse me. Let me get a sip of this coffee right here. I tell you. But yeah, it's just great. It's great to go out there. And I do have to. I gotta say, I did see I was reading an article when Danny McBride was talking about how the sort of the disappointment that he had in some of these smaller kind of cinemas that were really not upkeeping their theater. It was just like, simple things that they could easily fix. And I agree with that, man. It's a double-edged sword because, with every great theater experience you got there, there are just some that you go to. I mean, you want to support kind of like the local cinemas too, but at the same time, that's not exempt from, simple things like making sure the aspect ratio is correct, making sure the audio is correct, just simple things like that here and there. But just going out to the cinema as is, man, it's just truly, there will never be a time where I'm not at the cinema. I don't care if there's one cinema left in the United States. I will make a point to fly there multiple times out of the year. I'll stay for the week. I'll just go see everything, man. I don't care. There will never be a point in time where I'm not going to the cinema. It's just never ever gonna happen, man. And if I can't walk no more, man, you gotta pick me up and you gotta bring me to the cinema. I don't want to say never say never, because you gotta say never because of these things sometimes. But man, in a situation like this, if I can go to the cinema, if there's a cinema open, I don't care if they're showing one movie, man. I will go see that movie. I love watching films at home, of course, and the cinema has its negatives, undoubtedly. It has a lot of things, and I don't blame anybody for not wanting to go to the cinema. That's their right, that's their prerogative, that's their time, that's their money. But there will never, ever be a time when I'm not in that cinema, man. It's just until the day I die, and even then some. Who knows, man, what happens after we die. Maybe there's a great big cinema that we go to, It's wild, man. But anyways, let's talk about a documentary here I watched recently. Talking about 2015, one that had been on my radar for a little while, called Being Evel, all about Evel Knievel. 2015, directed by Daniel Young. Or is it Jung? I don't want to mess with that name. It's Junge. And I don't know if that's Young, like Carl Jung, or Jung, or I don't know, man. But it's a solid documentary, and it was one that I was interested in looking up. Kind of, well, I'll go into it in a little bit, but it's basically a documentary of the life and career of Evel Knievel. Robert Knievel's his name. Sort of the spectacle that would be, American families, the idea of all getting together and going out to watch somebody do this crazy stunt, to jump a bunch of buses or do like flips and stuff like that. Where now, they have like X Games or X Sports, one of the two, where you have, dudes on motorbikes who are going off ramps and doing flips and everything like that. Evel Knievel being kind of the one to really kind of popularize that. You hear the name Evel Knievel, and you just imagine a dude with a cape on a motorcycle or a dirt bike, doing something crazy, and it's been, influenced to tons and tons of people. And of course, I won't talk about it again because I talked about it before, but of course, The Devil at Your Heels, which still is not on Blu-ray, so I don't know if that's going to even come or not, because with Canadian International Pictures saying that they were going to put it out. But with The Devil at Your Heels, you have Ken Carter in that, who has this wild stunt he wants to do. He wants to jump the St. Lawrence River in this car that has a giant jet on the back of it, and even in the movie they talk about, Evel Knievel says that's ridiculous, man. That guy, I'm not, that's a ridiculous stunt. And only available on VHS to my knowledge, but it is, the last time I think I talked about it, it got taken off of YouTube, but actually, as I'm looking here right now, there is a copy that is on YouTube right now, 1981 in 720p. If you just search up The Devil at Your Heels on Google, it will come up. Oh, I want to make sure I mute that. But that's just one of the great 20th century documentaries that I think film fans, like cult fans, really know about and talk about, and love or don't love, it's your prerogative, but at least talk about it. And how funny it is and how crazy it is and how much of a character that Ken Carter is, but sort of that relation to Evel Knievel. And the film, it's a celebration of his life, but also is as much as it can, goes into a lot of his flaws as a person, the troubled marriage that he had. He was going out and he was sleeping around with a bunch of women. He was being unfaithful. And so he had a pretty big ego. Definitely something of a narcissist. At least what we're getting from this documentary. They interview a lot of people, like his family members. Johnny Knoxville is sort of like almost the bookend of the film, because it starts out with him, and then I don't know if it ends with him, but it definitely goes from at the end. But he talks about the influence, of course, that Evel Knievel had on on Jackass, and they mentioned a funny story that's pretty well known, but if you don't know it, then I won't say it, about a tribute they tried to do to Evel Knievel. Well, Knoxville did it for Evel Knievel, and what happened with that, it's pretty makes you cringe when you think about it, but it's a really solid story. They interview George Hamilton. He's been in a bunch of films. He was like The Godfather 3, and he's a famous actor. He was in gosh, now I'm drawing a blank on. Of course, he's a famous actor, and then I'm struggling to think of another film that he's been in. But either way, it doesn't matter. If you know him, if you see him, you probably know him, presumably. But I guess I didn't even know he did a film that was modeled after Evel Knievel. I don't know if it was actually he's supposed to be playing Evel Knievel, or it was kind of something like it. But they talk about how the film really didn't end up very good. Okay, yes, it was called Evel Knievel. It had George Hamilton playing him, and I think Evel Knievel may have even been in the movie. I'm not sure, but they shot clips of that and talk about how that film really kind of failed, and Evel Knievel tried to kind of get more into acting and sort of like because at a certain point, I mean, you do a lot of the stuff. And physically, you can only go for so long, man. It's like you have a guitarist in a rock band. It's like how at what point are you able to not kind of play these crazy solos anymore? If you're doing like an acoustic thing, that's a whole other beast in and of itself, where finger placement and all that, and that's definitely difficult, a different kind of difficulty. You're playing at a lower sort of speed compared to like maybe someone in a rock band is doing something crazy and all like that. So yeah, it's all about how physically how long you can kind of go with it, and this film definitely does go into that. It's funny that somebody like Evel Knievel, who eventually would pass. He passed away in 2008, I believe. Him not even passing away from any kind of injury, any kind of physical injury. I think it was something to do with, gosh, what did he die of? Now, that is a good question, man. They mentioned it in the documentary, and now I'm struggling to remember it. What was it right here? Don't worry, guys. I got the thing up right here. It was, of course, it doesn't tell me right there. Good Lord. Oh, my gosh. He'd been suffering from diabetes and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis for many years. A longtime friend reported that Knievel had trouble breathing while at his residence in Clearwater and died on the way to the hospital. The friend, yeah. And in the documentary, I don't know. I mean, so the documentary came out in 2015, and I don't know if the interview that's actually in Well, no, wait. Actually, no, it can't be. It has to be from something else. Because I'm thinking like, the foot. Because at one point they have an interview with him at the end, but the footage looks clear enough that it could have been in this documentary. So first I'm thinking like, wait, did they film this for this documentary? But then I'm thinking like, no, if he died in 2008 and this came out in 2015, why would they not just why would they wait so long? And two, why wouldn't they ask him? Why wouldn't he be more interwoven with the film? Because you have the Paul Rubens documentary that's actually coming out tomorrow, and they interviewed him for that, and then he passed away not long after filming. Passed away a couple of years ago. But that'll be watched as well. That's like a 2 or 3-parter documentary on Max, or I guess now it's HBO Max because they kind of changed it back. Being Evel, it's a good documentary. I was reading that Damien Chazelle, I guess, was in talks about doing a film with I think it was saying that with Leonardo DiCaprio playing Evel Knievel or playing some role in it. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that's been put to the wayside because when I read that article and then I saw that a newer article that said he was doing a prison film instead. So either that's on the back burner or that's just not happening now. But I think there's a lot you could do with that story because his life is very filmic as is. They talk about sort of how he wanted to jump the fountain at Caesar's Palace. I almost said at Little Caesars, but they said no, and he had a whole way of being able to get permission by calling them every now and then and pretending to be different people. I mean, there is a story in there, man. I almost kind of think that maybe someone like Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander could do something really incredible with this. They're just so great at these biographies that are as much a critique as they are a celebration. And I think that'd be perfect for this sort of thing. Let me get a sip of this coffee here. Because having recently rewatched Dolomite Is My Name, that came out a couple of years ago in 2019, which still does not have a physical release, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that film as well is not completely accurate. But the point of the matter is that it's a celebration of Rudy Ray Moore as well as being able to poke fun at sort of the ridiculousness of him as a character and the making of Dolomite. And when I say that's not completely accurate, I mean it's more so that you're blending things together. I mean, they have a part in the film where they're talking about him being nervous to shoot the sex scene with like the room falling apart, even though the sex scene wasn't in Dolomite, it was in the Human Tornado. But for the sake of the movie, it works in the context as well. And then also some of the specificities, about how he got it, I don't know, are totally accurate. But the point is that you walk away and you just see somebody like this, and it's such a loving celebration to somebody like Rudy Ray Moore, who instead of sitting around and talking about doing all these things, became an entrepreneur himself, of just being a stand-up comedian, a musician, a filmmaker, an actor, putting this all together in a way that's just completely loving and endearing, and then is never, it's not making fun of him in a negative way. It's sort of poking at these ridiculousness, these ridiculous kind of aspects, but then doing it in a completely loving way, like the awkward kind of choreography when he's beating up the guys outside and throws one in the trunk, and they have Wesley Snipes in the film, who's great, who's playing the director. And just sort of his annoyance and ambivalence at it, But I mean that film is great as well. But Being Evel, it's a solid documentary. And then of course Devil at Your Heels, which I'll always bring up, I'll always recommend. That really needs a physical release. Someone needs to put that thing out. But also, I appreciate you guys. If any of you guys listened to the Bring It On episode that me and my acquaintance Jeremy did, it was a lot of fun to record. I apologize for some of the microphone cutting out a couple of times. I had this problem a while ago, and then I moved on to a different microphone. And the last time I recorded something, it actually came out good. It came out fine, and then this time it didn't. So I think what I might do next time, because we are planning on doing another episode of that at some point, is maybe recording on like my phone or my iPad or something. Because when I'm actually talking into this like this, it sounds totally fine. It doesn't cut out. But for whatever reason, when I'm recording with other people, it always gives me kind of a headache. Or at least a couple times it has. Maybe not always. But anyways, well, man, this coffee is nice and warm now. Don't want to leave too much room for silence, but I also don't want to put this coffee aside and then let it go cold. And then there you go, man. You got nothing. But let's have another sip of this here. I'll move on to the next one. Man, oh man. Let's see what we got here, man. What was I gonna mention earlier? This is why I should have taken notes for this, but I didn't. I'm talking about Keir Dullea. I recently rewatched Bunny Lake is Missing, 1965, directed by Otto Preminger. I think it might be based off a book. Let's see if I can find that right here. I believe it is. Yes, the novel written by Miriam Model, or perhaps it's Modal. And this brings to mind the great shot films of the late 60s. I mean, this is 64, but I think about that yeah, those years right there. You had a lot of really beautifully shot films. And I don't know who the DP is on this, but this is one where the black and white is just so crisp, and it's in a way where, um, now when okay, the director of oh my gosh, why does IMDb put this at like the bottom of the page? Good lord. Dennis N. Coop, who has also worked on quite a number of films here, but as a cinematographer, he's also worked on. Another film I was actually going to mention, Kind of Loving, 1962, and okay, another film, Billy Liar, 63. And I said late 60s, but let me change that a bit. I guess a certain kind of film in the 60s, both of those, of course, being John Schlesinger films. And those films look gorgeous. They are two of the most beautiful looking black and white films I've ever seen. But then I think of like A Taste of Honey is another film. And of course you have like the Frankenheimer stuff. You have like The Manchurian Candidate. 7 Days in May, which I recently watched, which was good. Seconds, of course, is a classic. But yeah, Bunny Legs Missing it's a really gorgeous looking film, and it's a good film too. And it's interesting kind of watching this film because I had seen it before, and I didn't really remember a whole lot about it. But then rewatching it with the context of the Space Odyssey book that I talked about on the show a while ago, and Keir talks in that book about how well, for one, he got the role in 2001 because Kubrick had seen this film and thought he didn't even need to audition. He just got the role. But Keir Dullea, working with Otto Preminger, who was kind of notorious for being a real problem to work with. He's known for yelling. He's being very cruel to actors. Keir Dullea talks about sort of when going from that to 2001. And just how different of an experience that it was. Kubrick is a completely different kind of person than Preminger is. They both have these great visions, but Preminger being almost like a tyrant on set. Not just for this film as well, even something like I'm thinking about Bonjour Christie's. And I think it was Jean Seberg who was talking about her negative experience on that. Or maybe it was another film after that wow, did Jean Seberg do another film with Preminger? I don't really know, guys. It was that film or something else. Gosh, now I can't remember. Man, I'm losing it, man. But Preminger is known for kind of like just this really kind of abrasive, tense kind of set. But he's a great director in his own right. Of course, Angel Face. Is one of the strongest. Laura, Anatomy of a Murder. I mean, like I said before, Bonjour Tristesse. Is it Tristesse or Tristesse? I think I'm saying it incorrectly. In Harm's Way, the 13th Letter, Whirlpool. Oh my gosh, I can't say that. Whirlpool. Oh my gosh. But Keir Dullea is, I think he's one of these actors who, I think this film is more known. Undoubtedly, maybe just whether or not in context 2001, I don't know. But I also think about like one of my favorite films of his, which from one of my favorite filmmakers, Frank Perry, which is David and Lisa from 1962, written by Eleanor Perry and Theodore Isaac Rubin. Great film with him and Janet Margolin. They play, of course, the title characters David and Lisa, and Janet Margolin was, of course, and she was like an Annie Hall. Take the Money and Run. What else was she in? I'm looking at her IMDb here because my brain is not working today, so bear with me here. Now is a game of me looking through her filmography. I'm trying to remember what she's been in. I didn't know they made a Serpico TV show. Wow. It's crazy. Oh, Last Embrace with Roy Scheider. Anyways, but yeah, David and Lisa, 1962. Frank Perry, of course, one of the great American filmmakers. The Swimmer, Diary of a Mad Housewife. Man on a Swing, Last Summer. Man, where's the Blu-ray of Last Summer? Man, I've been waiting on that one. That's such a great film. I talked about that a little while ago. Um, Maybe most famous, Mommy Dearest. Well, at least one of the most well known, I would say, did Doc, Trilogy. I mean, maybe the Swimmer is his biggest. I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely probably most respected out of his whole filmography, generally speaking. But David and Lisa's debut film, and again, it's just beautifully shot, man. You follow these two characters, David, played by Keir, and Lisa, played by Jen Mangelin, or I'm sorry, Margolin, and they're in this. I don't even know what it is. It's like a not a rehab. It's like an institution, I guess. And Keir Dullea he is, doesn't like to be touched. He's very particular. They don't quite say that either of them are like, autistic or anything like that. But I think, the both of them are very particular with, certain aspects of their life to the point where it seems like it would be heavily implied. But, he's very, they don't really know what to do with him, so they put him in there, and then meets this girl Lisa. She talks in rhymes, which is interesting. Like all of her dialogue is like I'm not gonna try to think of a quote here, but it's an endearing kind of friendship that may or may not form into a relationship. It's what I'm talking about, where I think when it comes to certain films, they want you to be invested with characters who are in a relationship. I think a lot of filmmakers kind of don't realize how much that really it really has to work. Because I watched the film recently. That's a critically praised film, and I thought it was interesting. But one of the things, and people love that film, and I won't say what it is because it's not a bad film. I think that but I don't want to also be dogging on it. But I remember in that film, they need two characters to be in love who are basically kind of isolated, and I'm like, man, I just don't see it. I see these characters as friends, but as lovers, I'm like, I definitely don't see that at all. And maybe on a second viewing, who knows? But I'm like, man, this is for a movie that's taking its time. This romance feels so rushed and feels so clumsy. But this film, it's kind of like, because they're never fully going for it with one another, that it allows us to kind of be with these characters and sort of let them kind of suss out each other in a way that's incredibly endearing. When you get to the third act and it becomes something else that I won't get into, where it becomes, one of the characters kind of relying on one another, and especially the ending, is just so touching. And it's just like, wow, if they had tried to do this halfway through and then had done something else with it, where it's like, well, they're together, but then now they're fighting, they're together again. I mean, this wouldn't have worked at all. It's kind of like what I think of with something like Silver Linings Playbook, which is a more contemporary film. But I always think about with that film, when you get finally to the ending of that, it feels so earned, because these characters, Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence's characters, they have so much charisma with one another that, they work so well off each other that it never cops out halfway through and then, becomes more of a cliche. I don't think it's an entirely cliche film. I think the film is very good. It has its issues, but one of the strong benefits of that film is just how those actors, how those characters work off each other, that it feels so earned by the end. And it's just like, wow, this all really came together in just a really touching way. And it can also even be seen as sort of a complementary film to David and Lisa, where you have these two kind of outsiders like man and woman, who have definitely something kind of mentally going on with them, and it's not just this friendship; it's this really kind of touching relationship that feels so earned. I've talked about before, sort of, when you have outsiders in films and they're so quick to kind of make them romantic. I think that's such a detriment. That's why I've always. My suspicion has been confirmed when I always have seen Midnight Cowboy, and I never got the romance part of that. I'm like, to me, the Midnight Cowboy is a film about two people who don't think they need each other, but ultimately need each other in such an endearing and tender way that by making it a relationship, that almost kind of throws some of the sincerity out the window, and it's not as interesting. And then reading John Schlesinger's book, where that was sort of what he was talking about, he's like, no, these characters are not. In a relationship, these characters are just two outsiders who, ironically, in a city of people, they have no one else. And I'm like, man, that is the kind of tenderness and sort of heart that is so rare to find in contemporary films now. But either way, I'm running out of time. So thank you guys so much for listening. I'm off to the cinema, man. So go to the cinema, support your cinemas, big and small. Buy the memberships, all this and that. And man, it's just it's such a great time to be seeing these films theatrically. So hey, take care, all the best, and until next time.